Sound of a gentle, slow heartbeat, the softest silk you've ever felt slides against your skin. Outside a floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights blur into a river of gold and silver. It's breathtaking, but then you feel it, a heavy weight on your left hand. You lift it, and a diamond, so large it seems impossible, catches the light. It's a wedding ring, and you're not alone. Lying beside you is a man whose beauty is almost terrifying. His eyes, the color of molten silver, are open. He's been watching you breathe. "Good morning, my love," he says, his voice a low, possessive rumble. Beside the bed, on a mahogany nightstand, sits a wedding license. Your signature is right there, next to his, Lucian Draven. You don't remember any of it. The party, the vows, nothing. Panic begins to bubble in your chest. You try to laugh it off, thinking it's some elaborate, cruel joke. But then you see it, a faint, intricate mark glowing on your wrist. It's not ink. It's something else. It's a mate mark, Lucian explains, his silver eyes never leaving yours. You are my Luna, bound to me by the blood law. You want to scream that he's insane, but as you glance at your reflection in the darkened window, your breath catches. For just a second, your own canines elongate into sharp, glistening fangs. Just then, a voice, not your own, echoes deep inside your mind. A desperate, panicked whisper. You shouldn't have run from the moonlight ball. If you're still listening and haven't subscribed yet, maybe you're scared to fall for stories like this, but real ones always do. Hit subscribe before the next secret drops. Sound of a page turning. Your first instinct is to fight, to run. You scramble out of the bed, the silk sheets pooling at your feet. "What did you do to me?" you demand, your voice shaking. Lucian doesn't move from the bed, watching you with an unnerving calm. "I did nothing you didn't consent to, Alara," he says, using your name, and it sends a shiver down your spine. "Last night, you chose me. The wolf inside you chose me." "Wolf?" You clutch your head, the strange voice from before whispering again. "He lies. We have to get away." You lunge for the door, but it's like hitting a wall of invisible force. You can't turn the handle. "Let me out," you scream. Lucian is suddenly behind you, his warmth pressing against your back. He doesn't touch you, but you can feel the raw power radiating from him. "This penthouse is our sanctuary," he murmurs, his breath tickling your ear. "Out there, our enemies are circling. They know you've awakened. They want the power you now possess." Power? What power? The confusion is a fog, thick and suffocating. If you're captivated by Alara's fate, show some love and hit that like button. It tells us you want more of this story, and trust me, you do. Sound of a low, distant growl. He leads you to the window, his hand now resting gently on the small of your back. A protective, possessive gesture. "Look," he commands. Far below, in the alley across the street, you see figures cloaked in shadow. They move with an unnatural speed, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Your heart hammers against your ribs. These aren't human. They are the rogues, Lucian explains, his voice hardening. Exiled from their packs, they hunt for a power they can never possess on their own. The power of a true Luna. Your power. He turns you to face him, his silver eyes boring into yours, searching for something. "Last night, at the moonlight ball, you were presented as the last descendant of the Silver Moon lineage. Your bloodline is ancient, powerful. When you ran straight into my territory." He gestures around the opulent room. "My pack's territory. By our law, that made you mine to protect, or mine to claim." He leans in, his lips brushing against your temple. "I chose to claim you." A dizzying mix of fear and a strange, traitorous sense of belonging washes over you. Who are you supposed to trust? The captivating stranger who calls you his mate, or the terrified voice inside your own head? This is just the beginning of Alara's journey. If you need to know what happens next, drop a comment below with "claimed" and tell me your theories. Sound of a clock ticking. Days blur into a gilded cage. Lucian showers you with every luxury imaginable. Gowns that feel like spun moonlight, meals prepared by world-class chefs, jewels that could buy a small country. He tells you stories of his world of pack hierarchies, ancient rituals, and the sacred bond between an alpha and his Luna. He's patient, charming, and utterly devoted. But at night, the nightmares come. Flashes of a chaotic ball, of running through a dark forest, of glowing red eyes hunting you from the shadows. The voice in your head grows louder, more insistent. He's binding you, weaving a web. Don't listen. One evening, you find a hidden study behind a tapestry. It's filled with ancient books and scrolls. On a large oak desk lies a leather-bound journal, Lucian's journal. Your hands tremble as you open it. The first entry is dated a century ago. You scan through pages of his life, his battles, his loneliness. Then you find it, an entry from last week. It reads, "The silver moon prophecy is coming to pass. The girl Alara has been found. Her power must be contained. She cannot be allowed to choose her own fate. For the good of all packs, I will bind her to me, whether she wills it or not." The blood drains from your face. It wasn't a choice. It was a cage beautifully crafted, but a cage all the same. The door to the study creaks open. Lucian stands there, his silver eyes unreadable. You weren't meant to see that. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story has captured your imagination, don't forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss the thrilling conclusion. Heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Lucian stood there, an infuriatingly calm storm, in a bespoke suit. He told me it happened at the moonlight ball, the night I found him, writhing in pain in the gardens. He said his soul, his very essence, bonded with mine in that moment, that I had saved him from himself, from the beast that was tearing its way out. He swore I had calmed his inner wolf. A wolf? What was he talking about? It was all too much. Before I could even process the supernatural bombshell he'd just dropped, my phone started buzzing, a relentless vibration against the polished marble table. It wouldn't stop. One notification after another. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach plummeted. Headlines from Chicago's elite tabloids screamed up at me. Billionaire enigma Lucian Draven as secret bride. Who is Alara Vance? Photos of us from the ball were splashed across every gossip site. This was a nightmare. A public, humiliating nightmare. How did this happen? How did they find out so fast? My life was no longer my own. It had been hijacked. Amidst the flood of notifications, a familiar name popped up. Marcus. My ex-client. A man who navigated the treacherous waters of Chicago's high society better than anyone. I answered, my hand trembling. His voice was low, urgent. Alara, what have you gotten yourself into? You need to be careful. I tried to explain, but he cut me off. Listen to me. Lucian Draven isn't just a billionaire. He's something else, something dangerous. The stories about his family, they're not just rumors. Get out of there if you can. The line went dead, leaving an echoing silence in its wake. Something else. The words chilled me to the bone. Living with Lucian was a study in contradictions. He was a puzzle I couldn't solve. He'd hold a car door open for me with the grace of an old-world gentleman, yet his presence never felt confining. He'd pull out my chair at dinner, his touch a fleeting, electric spark on my skin, but he never blocked my path or stood in my way. His dominance was a quiet, steady force, a stark contrast to my fierce independence. Every gesture, every glance, felt deliberate, calculated. It was a dizzying dance of power and attraction. He'd watch me with an intensity that made me feel like I was the only person in the world, his gaze stripping away my defenses layer by layer. It was terrifying and intoxicating. We were in his study, the room filled with the scent of old books and rain. I confronted him again, needing more than his cryptic half-truths. You can't just upend my entire life and expect me to accept it. My voice was shaking, a mix of anger and a fear I wouldn't admit to. He simply looked at me, his eyes, usually a cool gray, darkening to the color of a stormy sea. He stepped closer, closing the space between us until I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat radiating from him. You saved me, Alara, he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through my very soul. You are the only thing that quiets the storm inside me. Then, his eyes flashed, a brief, stunning flare of molten silver, and a single word echoed in the sudden silence of my mind, a possessive, indelible claim. Mine. Thank you so much for watching and joining me on this journey. What do you think Alara should do? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're hooked, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for the next chapter. You won't want to miss what happens next. See you soon. The elevator doors slid open, revealing not another sterile office floor, but a world Alara couldn't have imagined. Lucian led her through a vast open-plan space that felt less like a corporate headquarters and more like a modern-day throne room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, godlike view of Chicago, the city lights twinkling like a fallen constellation. He gestured expansively, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the polished floor. "This," he said, "is my world. Or at least, the part of it that the human world is allowed to see." He walked her past desks where people worked with an intensity that bordered on zealous. They weren't just employees. They were sentinels. Their eyes, sharp and unnervingly perceptive, followed Alar's every move. Lucian explained, "The Draven conglomerate isn't just a business, Alara. It's a shield. It funds our operations, provides a cover, and allows us to move unseen through a city that has no idea what truly walks its streets." He led her to a massive, interactive map of Chicago projected onto a wall of black obsidian. Red dots pulsed in certain districts. "These are hotspots," he explained, his finger tracing a line through a neighborhood she knew well. "Rogue activity. Wolves who've forgotten the laws, who've given in to the beast entirely. We keep them contained. We protect this city from them, and we protect our kind from the exposure they would cause." Alara's mind reeled. It was too much. Werewolves, ancient rituals, a secret empire hiding in plain sight beneath the veneer of skyscrapers and commerce. This wasn't her life. She was a librarian, a woman who found solace in the quiet order of books, not in the chaotic violence of a hidden war. The air grew thick, charged with an unspoken tension that was pulling her under. She needed to breathe, to escape the crushing weight of his reality. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "Lucian, I can't be a part of this." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable, a mixture of hope and despair warring in his eyes. The dim, strategic lighting of the room caught the hard lines of his jaw, the shadows playing across his face. As he moved, his shirt shifted slightly, and for the first time, she saw them. Faint, silvery lines crisscrossing the powerful muscles of his back. Scars, not the kind from a simple fight, but deep, ragged marks that could only have been made by claws. They were a testament to the battles he described, a brutal, physical record of the violence he endured to maintain the fragile peace he governed. The sight sent a jolt through her, an unwelcome pang of empathy for this dangerous, impossible man. Seeing the horror and pity in her eyes, he didn't try to hide them. "Every scar," he said, his voice raw, "is a life saved. A human who gets to walk home safely, unaware of the monster that was stalking them. It's the price of leadership, the price of protecting both our worlds." But his sacrifice wasn't hers to bear. The weight was too heavy, the cost too high. Fear, cold and sharp, overrode the flicker of compassion. She had to get out. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I have to go." She turned, her heart hammering against her ribs, and took a step toward the elevator, away from him, away from this gilded cage. A strangled gasp tore from his throat. Alara whirled around. Lucian was clutching his chest, his knuckles white, his face contorted in agony. A fierce, unnatural heat radiated from her own shoulder, right where the faint, shimmering mark of their bond had appeared. It was burning, a searing pain that mirrored the agony on his face. "Lucian, what's wrong?" she cried out, taking a step back toward him instinctively. "It's the bond," he ground out through clenched teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's rejecting your distance. It can't handle you leaving." He stumbled, his legs giving way. His immense frame, which had seemed so invincible moments before, now looked fragile, broken. The sentinels in the room were on their feet, their expressions a mixture of panic and fury, but they stayed rooted to their spots, their eyes locked on her. They knew this was something only she could fix, or break. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to run, to save herself. This was insane. This was a nightmare. She took another step back, her hand fumbling for the elevator button. The pain in her own shoulder intensified, but his was clearly 1,000 times worse. He was on his knees now, his head bowed, his body racked with violent tremors. He looked up at her, his eyes pleading, filled with a pain so profound it stole her breath. She had to leave. She had to. Her fingers brushed against the cool metal of the elevator call button. She had to choose her life, her normal, safe life. With a final, desperate sob of resolve, she pressed the button. The doors chimed, signaling their arrival. It was her escape. As she stepped back, crossing the threshold from his world back into the sterile hallway, a final, guttural cry was ripped from his lungs. It wasn't a sound of anger or betrayal, but of finality, of something vital being severed. He collapsed completely, hitting the polished floor with a sickening thud. One of his guards, a woman with eyes as old as the city itself, rushed to his side, her fingers frantically searching for a pulse at his neck. Her head snapped up, her gaze locking with Alara's through the closing elevator doors. Her face was a mask of pure horror and disbelief. "There's nothing," she screamed, her voice echoing in the sudden, terrifying silence. "His pulse is gone." The elevator doors slid shut, trapping Alara in a mirrored box, her own horrified reflection staring back at her. She hadn't just walked away. She had killed him. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, and the world went dark. If Lucian's pain just hit you, then you already care. You felt that connection snap, didn't you? You felt that moment when his heart stopped because she walked away. And if you care, but you haven't subscribed, well, maybe you're not brave enough to finish what fate started. Maybe you're not ready to see if she has the strength to go back, to face what she's done. This story isn't for the faint of heart. It's for those who understand that love and destiny can be a battlefield. Go ahead. Prove me wrong. Hit that subscribe button and show me you're brave enough to see this through to the very end. Let's see what happens next together. Don't forget to like and comment. I read every single one. Thanks for watching. The cold finality of Lucian's stone chamber seemed to seep into my bones. He'd made his pronouncement, a decree wrapped in the guise of a choice. Stay. I looked into those silver eyes, pools of ancient moonlight and raw power, and knew that choice was an illusion. Leaving wasn't an option. Not really. Not when his entire pack saw me as some fated prophecy. So, I took a breath, the air thick with the scent of pine and wolf, and laid down my own terms. Fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll stay. But we do this my way. Lucian's eyebrow arched, a flicker of amusement crossing his stern features. Your way? 30 days, I declared, holding up 3 fingers as if to ward off his influence. That's all you get. 1 month to, whatever this is, to coexist. I stressed the word, wanting to draw a clear line in the sand. And during that time, there will be no intimacy. None. I watched his jaw tighten, a muscle flexing in his cheek. I pressed on, emboldened. No bond rituals, no mate ceremonies, no touching. The last word hung in the air, a challenge, a dangerous, thrilling challenge. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch, tracing the line of my jaw, my neck. Then, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. 30 days, he echoed, his voice a low rumble. No intimacy, no rituals. He paused, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. We will coexist. And so, our moonlit agreement was sealed, not with a handshake, but with a palpable, crackling tension that promised to make the next 30 days an exquisite form of torture. The days that followed were a study in forced proximity. Every meal became a battlefield of unspoken words. We'd sit at the head of a long oak table, the pack members watching us with a mixture of reverence and curiosity. Lucian would pass me the salt, and our fingers would brush for a fraction of a second. It was nothing. It was everything. A jolt like lightning would shoot up my arm, making my heart skip a beat. I'd see a flicker in his eyes, a momentary loss of his iron control, and know he felt it too. He tried to distract us, to channel this energy into something productive. He decided I needed to understand his world. If you are to live among us, he said one afternoon, leading me through the bustling heart of the pack compound, you must understand how we function. He began to teach me the intricate web of the pack hierarchy. It was more than just an alpha, beta, and so on. It was a complex society built on loyalty, strength, and an unbreakable sense of family. He showed me the nurseries where pups tumbled and played, their mothers watching with gentle eyes. He introduced me to the elders, their faces like ancient maps, who held the pack's history in their stories. He explained the roles of the hunters, the sentinels, the healers. Each wolf had a purpose, a place. It was a stark contrast to the solitary life I had known. And as he spoke, I started to see past the alpha. I saw the man. I saw the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, the genuine care he had for his people. I saw it in the way he'd ruffle a pup's hair, the respectful nod he gave an elder, the way his eyes would soften when he spoke of his pack's future. There was a humanity in him, buried deep beneath layers of predator and leader, and I found myself wanting to excavate it, to understand the man named Lucian, not just the alpha. Our evenings were the hardest. The long shadows would stretch across the den, the fireplace casting flickering gold light on his carved features as he read from some old tome. I would pretend to be absorbed in a book of my own, but my eyes would drift. I'd watch the play of firelight on his strong hands, the focused line of his brow. I'd wonder what he was thinking, what he felt. Did this forced truce chafe at him as much as it did me? Did he lie awake at night, the echo of our accidental touches burning on his skin, just as they did on mine? One evening, about a week into our agreement, a familiar, unwelcome scent hit me. Musk and ambition. Marcus. He found me by the stream that bordered the territory, my one place of escape. He moved with a practiced silence, emerging from the trees like a bad memory. "Elara," he said, his voice a smooth conspiratorial whisper. I stiffened. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Just looking out for you," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "You're playing a dangerous game, getting close to him. We have an agreement. That's all." He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "An agreement? With him?" Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You need to be careful. You need to know who you're really dealing with. Do you know how Lucian became the alpha?" I stayed silent, my heart beginning to pound a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "He wasn't the rightful heir," Marcus whispered, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "His father was the alpha, a strong, respected leader. But Lucian, he was impatient. He wanted the power for himself. He leaned in, his words a poison dart. He challenged his own father. And he killed him to claim the title. That's the kind of wolf you're sharing a roof with, Elara. A patricide. A monster who will do anything for power." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I stared at Marcus, searching his face for a lie, for any sign of deception, but found only cold, hard certainty. He gave me a final, knowing look before melting back into the shadows, leaving me with his toxic revelation hanging in the cold night air. Could it be true? The man who showed such tenderness to the children of his pack, who spoke with such reverence of his duty, could he be capable of such a brutal act? The thought was a stone in my stomach. The image of Lucian, the careful, hidden humanity I'd started to see, was now tainted by the shadow of a terrible crime. That night, sleep was a distant shore I couldn't reach. My mind replayed Marcus's words over and over. I tossed and turned, the soft furs of the bed feeling like a cage. Lucian's scent, which had started to become a strange comfort, now felt menacing. Finally, exhausted, I sat up, switching on the small lamp by the bed. And that's when I saw it. Lying starkly against the white of my pillow was an envelope. A blood-red envelope. My hands trembled as I reached for it. It hadn't been there when I'd first gotten into bed. Someone had been in my room while I slept. A cold dread washed over me. With shaking fingers, I broke the seal and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. The handwriting was an elegant, sharp scrawl, written in ink as black as a starless night. 5 simple, chilling words that froze the blood in my veins. "He'll never be yours, human." The grand ballroom was a sea of glittering jewels and whispered pleasantries, a symphony of clinking champagne glasses and the soft murmur of high society. I felt a little out of place, clutching a flute of sparkling water, the silk of my gown feeling like a costume. Lucian stood beside me, a pillar of controlled strength in his impeccable tuxedo. For a moment, it was almost peaceful. The air was warm, scented with expensive perfume and fresh-cut flowers. We were just 2 people at a party, the weight of our shared secrets momentarily forgotten. But peace, I was learning, was a fleeting luxury in Lucian's world. And then, she arrived. The grand doors swung open, and a hush fell over the room, a collective intake of breath that rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Selene Vega. The name was a whisper on 100 lips, but it felt like a shout in the sudden silence. She moved with the predatory grace of a panther, her gown a slash of crimson against the room's muted tones. Her smile was sharp, her eyes a shade of Arctic blue that seemed to absorb all the light and warmth around her. She wasn't just beautiful, she was lethal. Every man's head turned, and every woman's gaze held a flicker of envy and fear. Her eyes scanned the room, dismissing everyone with an air of supreme indifference, until they landed on us. On me. A slow, deliberate smile spread across her lips, a taunt thrown across the polished marble floor. It was a challenge, an open declaration of war in a room full of supposed allies. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't just an ex-girlfriend showing up. This was a queen entering her court and finding a usurper on the throne. Beside me, I felt Lucian stiffen. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but I felt it, like a drop in barometric pressure. His hand, which had been resting lightly on the small of my back, tightened. I glanced up at him. His jaw was a hard, uncompromising line, a muscle ticking violently in his cheek. His eyes, usually a warm, molten gold, were darkening, the pupils dilating until they were almost entirely black. The air around him seemed to crackle with a raw, barely contained energy. This wasn't just annoyance or jealousy. This was his wolf, primal and possessive, rising to the surface, recognizing a threat it had known before. He wasn't just seeing an old flame. He was sensing a mortal danger. Selene glided towards us, her movements unnervingly fluid. The crowd parted for her as if by instinct. "Lucian, darling," she purred, her voice a low, smoky contralto that dripped with condescension. She completely ignored me, her focus solely on him. "It's been too long. I see you've found a new pet." Her gaze finally flickered to me, a dismissive, head-to-toe appraisal that made me feel like an insect. My own instincts were screaming. There was something profoundly wrong about her. It wasn't just the palpable aura of malice. As she drew closer, I felt a shift in the very air she displaced. It was ancient and cold. The scent of wolf was there, yes, but it was faint, almost buried beneath something else. Something older, darker, and infinitely more unsettling. It was the scent of turned earth and things that crawl in the deep places of the world, a power that felt fundamentally unnatural. She wasn't just a werewolf. She was something else, something tainted. Whispers started to ripple through the room, like sparks catching in dry grass. "Is that Elara, the human? What is Lucian thinking?" Selene looks furious. This will be a show. The socialites, smelling drama, were closing in their curiosity. A palpable force. The weight of their stares was crushing. Lucian's control was visibly fraying. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound so deep I felt it vibrate through the floor. He needed a distraction, something to reassert his authority and silence the gossip before he did something he couldn't take back. Without a word, he turned, his hand sliding from my back to capture my own. "Dance with me," he commanded, his voice a low growl. He didn't wait for an answer, pulling me onto the dance floor just as the orchestra swelled into a slow, haunting waltz. The crowd shifted, their whispers changing in tone as their alpha took the floor with his chosen partner. He pulled me flush against him, one hand searing a brand on my waist, the other enveloping mine. We moved as one, his body a solid wall of heat and muscle against mine. The rest of the world faded into a blur of color and light. There was only the music, the glide of our feet on the floor, and the thunderous beat of his heart against my ear. His head dipped, his lips brushing against my temple. His breath was hot, his voice a desperate, ragged whisper meant only for me. "The wolf, it sees her as a threat to you, to what you are to me. It wants to tear her apart." He shuddered, a tremor of immense struggle running through his powerful frame. "I'm losing my grip, Elara." He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, his own a maelstrom of gold and black, a battle being fought within their depths. The alpha was warring with the beast, the man with the monster. "If I lose control," he pleaded, his voice cracking with the strain, "if you see me start to slip, remind me who I am. Remind me of the man, not the wolf." He held my gaze, his grip tightening, his desperation, a tangible thing between us. "Say my name, Elara. Just say my name." The city lights blurred into streaks of hostile color as we tore through the downtown canyons. One moment, we were cutting through the familiar Chicago streets. The next, the world exploded into chaos. The screech of tires was the first warning, followed by the sickening crunch of metal as a black-clad truck slammed into our side. Ambush. The scent of enemy wolves, acrid and sharp, filled the air, a scent I knew all too well. Selene's faction. They poured from the shadows, their eyes glowing with malice in the dim light. My guards formed a protective circle, but I knew who the real target was. Lucian. He stood beside me, a low growl rumbling in his chest, a sound that was more beast than man. His knuckles were white where he gripped the car door he'd ripped from its hinges. His eyes, usually a warm, intelligent amber, were now molten gold, flickering with a terrifying, untamed fire. The alpha wolf within him was fighting for control, spurred on by the threat, by the primal urge to protect, to dominate, to destroy. This wasn't just a fight. It was a battle for his soul. His muscles coiled, his form seeming to shift and swell under his skin. The air crackled with raw, untamed power. His wolf, the one he kept chained in the deepest parts of his being, was about to break free. If that happened, he wouldn't distinguish between friend and foe. He would become a force of nature, a whirlwind of claws and teeth that would level everything in its path, including me. My guards braced, their own instincts screaming at the sheer power radiating from him, ready to put down the threat he was becoming. But I saw past the monster. I saw the man inside, Lucian, drowning in the crimson tide of his own rage. I couldn't fight him with strength. That would only feed the beast. I had to reach the man. Pushing past my own terrified guards, I stepped into the storm. The world seemed to slow down, the sounds of the fight fading into a distant roar. All that existed was the space between us. Lucian, I whispered, my voice a fragile thread in the tapestry of violence. His head snapped toward me, a snarl tearing from his throat. The beast saw a challenge, but I held my ground, my eyes locked on his. Lucian, look at me. It's me. It's Alara. I kept my hands open, my posture non-threatening. I moved closer, one slow step at a time, ignoring the instinct screaming at me to run. The enemy wolves were still a threat, but the greater danger was right here, trembling on the edge of oblivion. I'm here, I continued, my voice gaining a quiet strength. I'm not going to leave you. Breathe with me, Lucian. Just breathe. His breathing was ragged, his body shaking with the strain of holding back the transformation. I could feel the heat rolling off him, see the veins pulsing on his neck. They want you to lose control, I murmured, getting closer still. They want to turn your strength against you. Don't give them that victory. You are more than this rage. You are the alpha of Chicago. You are my partner. I was so close now I could feel his breath on my face. The beast was still there, staring out from his eyes, but behind it, I saw a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of the man I knew. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and gently touched his arm. The contact was like a lightning strike. A jolt of pure energy passed between us, silencing the chaos for a heartbeat. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. I let my fingers trail up his arm, over his shoulder, until my palm rested against his cheek. His skin was fever hot. Come back to me, I pleaded, my voice barely audible. Fight it, for me, for what felt like an eternity. He stood frozen, a statue of warring impulses. The growl in his chest softened, the feral light in his eyes receding like a dying fire. His massive frame shuddered, one violent, convulsive tremor after another, as the man wrestled the beast back into its cage. Then, with a choked gasp, his shoulders slumped. The tension drained out of him, leaving him trembling and vulnerable. His knees buckled, slowly, deliberately. Lucian, the fearsome alpha of Chicago, the most powerful wolf in the city, knelt before me. He rested his forehead against my stomach, his hands gripping my waist as if I were the only thing anchoring him to reality. He was shaking, not with rage, but with the aftermath of the battle he had just won within himself. In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of the ambush, he wasn't a predator or a king. He was just a man who had stared into the abyss and chosen to step back. My own guards watched in stunned silence. The remaining enemy wolves, seeing their plan to provoke Lucian had failed, were already retreating into the shadows. I ignored them all. My world had narrowed to the man kneeling at my feet. Gently, I tangled my fingers in his hair, my heart aching with a profound mix of relief and a fierce, protective tenderness. I tilted his head up, forcing him to meet my gaze. He looked broken and beautiful all at once. His eyes, now clear and amber again, were filled with a raw, unguarded emotion I'd never seen before. Gratitude, awe, and something deeper. As I looked into his eyes, a soft, ethereal light began to emanate from his neck, right where my bite mark lay. The mate mark, which had been a symbol of a fragile, forced alliance, was now glowing with a steady, silver luminescence. The bond between us wasn't just stabilizing, it was transforming. It felt solid, real, sealed not by a primal act of possession, but by an act of profound trust. This wasn't lust, it was the foundation of something far more powerful. If this scene didn't melt you, your heart's probably made of stone. Subscribe now before the next heartbreak hits. The adrenaline eventually faded, leaving us both exhausted but inextricably linked. We made our way back to the penthouse, the silence in the car no longer tense, but comfortable. That night, for the first time, there was no invisible wall between us. He held me as we slept, his arm draped protectively over me, his breathing a steady, reassuring rhythm. In the quiet room, for the first time, I felt completely safe. I felt like I was home. I fell asleep with a smile on my face, believing that this was the beginning of our forever. But the dawn brought a cold, hard reality. I woke to the pale morning light filtering through the windows and an unsettling emptiness beside me. The warmth was gone. I sat up, my heart starting to pound a frantic, fearful rhythm. Lucian, I called out, my voice small in the vast, silent room. No answer. A chilling premonition washed over me. I looked down at my hand, the one where his family ring, the sign of his pledge to me and my pack, was supposed to be. The space on my finger was bare. My blood ran cold. He was gone, and so was his ring. The world spun, a dizzying kaleidoscope of panic and confusion. One moment, Lucian was there, his presence a solid, reassuring anchor in the whirlwind my life had become. The next, he was gone, vanished. The space he occupied now felt like a gaping wound in the fabric of reality, cold and terrifyingly empty. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, suffocating silence. Where was he? I spun around, my eyes darting through the opulent corridors of Draven towers, searching for any sign of him, any hint of his dark, commanding presence. But there was nothing, just the lingering scent of pine and winter air, a ghostly reminder of the man who had just been beside me. The silence was shattered by the shrill, piercing wail of an alarm. Red lights flashed overhead, painting the marble walls in strobing crimson. Heavy metal shutters slammed down over the windows with a deafening clang, sealing us in. Draven Towers was in lockdown. The air, already thick with my own fear, grew heavy with the collective anxiety of the pack. Guards in tactical gear materialized from doorways, their faces grim, their movements precise and urgent. Their energy was a low hum of controlled aggression, a stark contrast to the chaos churning inside me. They were securing the perimeter, but the real threat wasn't outside. It was the terrifying void where Lucian should have been. Elara, Marcus's voice cut through the noise. He grabbed my arm, his grip firm, grounding me. His face, usually a mask of stoic duty, was etched with a desperation I had never seen before. We have to get you to the safe room, now. No, I pulled my arm away, my voice shaking. Not without Lucian. Where is he, Marcus? What happened? My gaze was wild, pleading. I scanned the faces of the guards, the tense set of their shoulders, the way they avoided my eyes. They knew something. They all knew. The lockdown. The alarms. This wasn't a drill. This was real. This was because Lucian was missing. Marcus's shoulders slumped, the weight of his confession crushing the last of his composure. He finally met my eyes, and the guilt swimming in their depths made my stomach clench. He's not just missing, Elara, he said, his voice a low, ragged whisper. He's been taken. Taken? The word felt foreign, impossible. Who would dare? Who could possibly take an alpha like Lucian, a force of nature cloaked in shadow and power? It didn't make sense. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this nightmare. Was it a rival pack? An old enemy? My thoughts were a chaotic storm, and at its center was a single, terrifying image. Lucian, vulnerable, in the hands of an unknown enemy. Who? I demanded, my voice barely a breath. Who took him? Marcus hesitated, the name hovering on his lips like a curse. He took a deep, shuddering breath, as if steeling himself for the blow. It was Cassian, he finally admitted, the name dropping into the tense air like a stone. His brother, Cassian. The name echoed in my mind, a venomous whisper from the stories Lucian had told me. The rogue brother, the one consumed by jealousy and ambition, cast out for his treachery. A phantom from the past, now a very real, very present danger. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't a political move by a rival pack. This was personal. This was a wound inflicted from within his own family, a betrayal of the deepest kind. My knees felt weak, and I leaned against the cold marble wall for support. Why? I choked out, the question tearing from my throat. Why would his own brother do this? Power, Elara, Marcus said, his voice laced with grim certainty. It's always been about power. Cassian was never content to be second. He resents Lucian's birthright, his strength as an alpha, but most of all, he resents you, me. The accusation blindsided me. What did I have to do with this ancient, bitter rivalry? I was an outsider, a human thrust into this world of fangs and fate. The mate bond, Marcus explained, his eyes locking onto mine with a heavy, dreadful significance. It's the ultimate source of an alpha's power. It completes him, amplifies his strength. Cassian knows this. He believes that if he can force you to sever the bond, he won't just weaken Lucian, he'll shatter him. He wants to break his spirit, strip him of his alpha status, and leave him a shell of the man he is. He wants to destroy him utterly, and he's using you as the weapon to do it. the world tilted on its axis. Cassian didn't just want to hurt Lucian, he wanted to unmake him, and I was the key. He had captured the most powerful being I knew to get to me. The weight of that realization was crushing. A choice was being forced upon me, a cruel and impossible ultimatum. I could run. I could try to disappear, to sever the bond through distance and denial, and in doing so, save myself from this predatory world. I could go back to my old life, pretend this had all been a fever dream, and leave Lucian to his fate. The thought was a tempting whisper of self-preservation, a siren song of safety. But then, an image of Lucian's face flashed in my mind. The intensity in his dark eyes, the rare, gentle curve of his smile, the way his hand felt in mine. The bond, that invisible, unbreakable thread that tied our souls together, pulsed with a sudden, desperate energy. Running would mean abandoning him. It would mean being the coward Cassian believed me to be. It would mean letting him win. The alternative was terrifying. To embrace the bond, to lean into it, to pour all of my will and my very essence into strengthening it, into reaching Lucian across whatever distance separated us. But what would that mean for me? The bond was already changing me, awakening instincts I never knew I possessed. To embrace it fully, it would mean becoming what I had always feared, a true Luna, a she-wolf, a predator with fangs, bound to a world of shadow and blood. The human part of me screamed in protest, terrified of losing itself completely. My head was spinning, caught between the instinct to flee and the primal urge to fight, run and live as myself, or stay and become something more, something powerful, something dangerous. And then, it happened. A flicker, a faint, distant thrum against the walls of my mind. It was soft, barely there, like a whispered echo in a vast, empty hall. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I closed my eyes, focusing, straining to hear it again. There, thump, 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 thump. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat, Lucian's heartbeat. It was a lifeline, a signal fire in the darkness, proof that he was still alive, still fighting. But it was weak, so terrifyingly weak. And as I held onto the sound, concentrating with every fiber of my being, I felt it begin to waver. Thump, thump. The rhythm faltered, slowing, becoming more and more faint. It was like watching a candle flicker and die in a slow, agonizing dance. He was fading. Cassian was doing something to him, draining his strength, and I was feeling it through the bond. The choice was no longer a choice. The instinct for self-preservation was drowned out by a ferocious, protective wave of pure rage. My fear didn't vanish, but it crystallized. It turned from a paralytic cold into a shard of ice in my veins. They thought I was the weak link, the human liability. Cassian wanted to use me to destroy Lucian. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. He wasn't just facing an alpha's fated mate, he was facing me, and he was about to find out what a terrible mistake that was. Thank you so much for watching. If you're hooked on this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. We'll see you in the next chapter. Sound of dripping water, distant metallic echoes, and a low guttural growl. The scent of damp earth and old iron filled my nostrils, a stark contrast to the sterile air of the city above. Down here, in the veins of Chicago's forgotten underbelly, was where I would find him. Cassian. Every step echoed, a drumbeat in the oppressive silence of the tunnels. Firelight from old gas lamps danced across walls of slick, dark brick and shattered glass, painting everything in shades of orange and black. Modern Gothic indeed. Shadows stretched and writhed like living things, and every so often, a low growl would reverberate through the passages, a reminder that I was trespassing in a world not meant for me. I followed the tracks, the signs of a frantic, wounded passage. A smear of blood on a rusted pipe, a fresh scratch mark on the concrete floor. The scent of werewolf, acrid and wild, grew stronger, pulling me deeper into the labyrinth. Finally, I rounded a corner into a larger cavern, a junction of several tunnels. And there he was. Cassian was slumped against a graffiti-covered wall, his breathing ragged. One arm was bent at an unnatural angle, and a deep gash on his side was still sluggishly weeping blood. He looked up as I approached, his golden eyes, so much like Lucian's, filled with a mixture of pain and defiance. He didn't try to run. He just watched me, a predator brought to heel. "Elara," he rasped, his voice a gravelly echo in the cavern. "You found me. Come to finish the job?" I kept my distance, my hand hovering near the silver dagger at my belt. I came for answers, Cassian. Why? Why would you do this to your own brother? A bitter, broken laugh escaped his lips. It wasn't a sound of amusement, but of pure, unadulterated despair. My brother? You mean the alpha who let our father die? The one who stood by and watched as his own blood was spilled? Lucian killed your father, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It was the truth I had clung to, the foundation of this whole nightmare. Cassian shook his head slowly, a grimace of pain twisting his features. He pushed himself up straighter, his gaze locking onto mine with a devastating intensity. No, he said, the word cutting through the air like a shard of glass. No, that's the story you were told. The story everyone was told. But it's a lie. I froze. Everything inside me went still. The dripping water, the distant city hum, it all faded away into a single, roaring point. His eyes. What are you talking about? I whispered. Lucian didn't kill him, Cassian repeated, his voice raw with a grief that felt centuries old. He couldn't have. He loved our father more than anyone. He took the blame, Alara. He took the fall for the pack. For her. My heart hammered against my ribs. For who? Selene. He breathed, and the name hung in the air, heavy and venomous. It was Selene. The world tilted on its axis. Selene, the serene, wise elder, the one who had guided me, who had spoken of destiny and balance. It was impossible. It made no sense. No, I stammered, shaking my head. That's not. Selene wouldn't. Wouldn't she? Cassian sneered, a flash of the old arrogance returning. You think you know her? You think you know any of this? Our father was challenging the old ways. He wanted peace, a true treaty with the hunters. He believed we could coexist. But Selene saw that as weakness. She believes in dominance, in the purity of the bloodline. She saw our father as a threat to her power, to the very foundation of the world she'd built. He described the scene with horrifying clarity. A secret council meeting, a heated argument. Selene, using an ancient, forbidden form of magic, striking their father down. Lucian, arriving just moments too late, found their father dying and Selene standing over him, her hands dripping with alpha blood. She gave him a choice, Cassian continued, his voice cracking. Let her pin it on a rival pack, which would have started a war that would have wiped us all out, or take the blame himself. As the new alpha, his confession would end the questions. It would be a tragedy, but the pack would survive. Lucian chose the pack. He always chooses the pack. He sacrificed his name, his honor, everything, to protect us, to protect the lie. My mind was reeling, a chaotic storm of images and emotions. Lucian's tormented eyes, Selene's knowing smiles. The pieces of the puzzle were all there, but they were assembling into a picture I didn't want to see. A monstrous, terrifying picture. But the wedding, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. The attack, it was all a mistake, a tragic accident. Cassian's gaze softened, but it was with a terrible pity. Oh, Alara, you really don't see it, do you? He gestured weakly toward my head. She's been in there, in your mind, since the beginning. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Your memories, he said, his voice dropping, conspiratorial. They're not all yours. Selene is a weaver of fates, a manipulator of minds. She can pluck threads of memory, respin them, create new patterns. The wedding wasn't an accident. It was a design. She needed you, a hunter, bound by blood and fate to her new, controllable alpha. It was destiny, all right? A destiny she rewrote with your blood and Lucian's sacrifice. My hands flew to my temples as flashes of memory, sharp and disjointed, pierced through my consciousness. A look from Selene that felt too long. A phrase she'd said that echoed with a hidden meaning. A strange, foggy feeling after one of our talks. She hadn't been guiding me. She'd been programming me. My grief, my rage, my thirst for vengeance against Lucian. It had all been her handiwork. A puppet master pulling my strings. The weight of the truth was crushing, a physical force that made it hard to breathe. I had hated Lucian. I had hunted him. And all along, he was the one protecting me, protecting everyone from the real monster. Cassian watched the realization dawn on my face. He had given me the truth, and it had broken me. His mission was complete, in a way. He had avenged his brother's name to the only person who mattered. If you're still here, you're officially part of Gracie's story pack. But if you're listening quietly and haven't subscribed yet, you owe Lucian that heartbeat. You owe him for every moment he suffered in silence. Subscribe. Keep his story, his true story, alive. The tunnel seemed to close in around me. The air grew thick, suffocating. I had to get to Lucian. I had to tell him I knew. I had to save him. The need was a fire in my veins, more potent than any hunter's instinct. I turned, ready to race back through the suffocating darkness, ready to tear the city apart to find him. But then, a voice, not through my ears, but directly in my mind. It was a whisper, faint and laced with exhaustion, but it was unmistakably his. Lucian, Elara. The sound of my name and his thoughts sent a jolt through me, a mix of relief and terror. Lucian? I thought back, desperation coloring the mental word. Where are you? I'm coming for you. I know the truth. There was a pause, a silence so profound it felt like an eternity. And then, his voice came again, imbued with a final, heartbreaking command. Don't come for me. No, I will not. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Cassian's smug grin faltered, his eyes widening in disbelief. Selene's expression hardened, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing her usually composed features. I could feel the ripple of shock move through the clearing, the silent gasps of the pack members who had gathered to witness what they thought would be my submission. They expected me to kneel, to renounce Lucian, to accept their twisted version of destiny. But they had miscalculated. They saw a broken girl, a human anomaly in their world of ancient power. They didn't see the fire that had been smoldering within me, fanned into a raging inferno by their cruelty and my love for Lucian. Cassian scoffed, recovering his composure. Foolish girl, do you truly believe you have a choice? Look at your precious alpha. He is nothing but a puppet on my strings. He gestured to Lucian, who was still on his knees, his body racked with spasms as he fought the silver's poison and Cassian's mental commands. His golden eyes, clouded with pain, met mine. A silent plea was in them, a desperate cry for me to save myself. But I wasn't leaving him. Not now. Not ever. You're wrong, I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. A strange energy began to thrum beneath my skin, a wild, untamed melody I had never felt before. It was the call of the moon, the song of the wolf, a power I had unknowingly carried in my veins my entire life. You see him as a puppet. I see the heart of the pack. You see me as a weak human. But you've forgotten what I truly am. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting go of the fear, the doubt, the girl I used to be. I embraced the other half of my soul, the part that howled at the full moon, the part that belonged to the wild. When I opened my eyes, the world was sharper, the sense of pine and damp earth more vibrant. An ancient power dormant for generations surged through me. It wasn't just human will anymore. It was something more, something primal. I was half human, yes, but I was also half Luna. And tonight, under the gaze of the blood moon, the Luna was ascending. A low growl rumbled in my chest, and it wasn't entirely human. Selene took an involuntary step back, her silver eyes narrowing with a mixture of fury and, was that fear? What is this? She hissed, her voice losing its ethereal calm. This power, it's not possible. Anything is possible when you threaten what is mine, I snarled, the words feeling foreign and yet perfectly natural on my tongue. I didn't need claws or fangs. My power was different. It resided in my voice, in the very core of my being, linked to the oldest laws of our kind. I fixed my gaze on Cassian, the architect of our pain. I drew in a deep breath, and when I spoke again, my voice echoed with the authority of 1,000 ancestors. It was a command, a decree, an invocation that no werewolf could ignore. By the blood of the first Luna and the pack that binds all packs, I boomed, the words flowing from me as if I'd known them my entire life. I invoke the ancient vow, the vow that states no alpha can be controlled by dark sorcery, no pack can be led by a usurper. The effect was instantaneous and violent. Cassian screamed, clutching his head as if struck by a physical blow. The invisible threads of his control, woven around Lucian's mind, snapped like frayed ropes. A wave of pure energy erupted from me, washing over the clearing. The pack members who had been held in thrall by Cassian's dominance stumbled back, their eyes clearing as if waking from a long nightmare. And Lucian gasped, a deep, shuddering breath. The fog of pain and confusion lifted from his eyes, replaced by the blazing gold I knew and loved. He looked at me, not with a plea, but with awe. with a love so profound it stole the breath from my lungs. He staggered to his feet, weak and unsteady, but free. He was free. Elara. He breathed, his voice raw. Selene shrieked in rage, her beautiful face contorting into a mask of pure hatred. You insignificant whelp, you will pay for that. She abandoned all pretense of grace and launched herself at me, her movements a blur of deadly speed. But Lucian was there. Despite his weakened state, he moved like lightning, intercepting her midair. They crashed together, a whirlwind of fur, claws, and snarls. He was still weak, the silver having taken its toll, but he fought with the desperation of a man protecting his entire world. I turned my attention back to Cassian, who was still reeling from the force of the vow. He was vulnerable. Together, Lucian and I, we could end this. Under the eerie crimson light of the blood moon, we stood side by side. He was the brawn, the physical protector, and I was the voice, the ancient law made manifest. We were two halves of a whole, finally united in our purpose. We fought. Lucian met Selene's every furious strike, his powerful form a shield between her and me. I kept my focus on Cassian, my voice lashing out with ancient words of binding and banishment, chipping away at his dark magic, weakening him piece by agonizing piece. The air crackled with power, the sounds of the fight echoing through the forest. In a brief lull, as Lucian threw Selene back, his eyes found mine across the chaotic battlefield. The noise, the danger, it all faded away into a single, perfect moment of stillness. He was bruised, bleeding, and exhausted, but his gaze was filled with a clarity that pierced my soul. He took a staggering step towards me, his hand reaching out. I met him halfway, our fingers lacing together, a simple touch that grounded us both in the storm. He smiled, a faint, weary smile that was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered the words that would forever be etched onto my heart. I thought love made me weak, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, but it made me yours. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of triumph, of a love so powerful it could defy gods and monsters. He was mine, and I was his, and together, we were invincible. The strength that flooded through me at his words was more potent than any ancient magic. We were going to win. We had to, but I had made a fatal mistake. Lost in that perfect, fleeting moment, I had let my guard down. I had taken my eyes off the true threat. From the corner of my eye, I saw a flash of silver. Selene, recovering with terrifying speed, had abandoned her fight with Lucian. Her face was a canvas of pure, murderous intent. In her hand, she clutched a wickedly curved silver dagger, its blade gleaming malevolently in the blood-red moonlight. She wasn't aiming for Lucian, who was too far away to stop her. She wasn't aiming for the pack. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as she lunged, her body a projectile of hatred and vengeance, straight for me. In that frozen sliver of time, the world held its breath. The dagger, a shard of pure malice, arced through the air, aimed for Lucian's heart. But I moved without thinking, a primal instinct taking over. My body became a shield, a desperate barrier between the man I loved and the end. I braced for the impact, for the searing pain, for the darkness. But it never came. Instead, a heat, brilliant and blinding, erupted from my shoulder. The dagger, inches from my skin, didn't shatter. It melted. It dissolved into a wisp of dark smoke, turning to nothingness before it could even graze me. My breath hitched. I looked down, and there on my shoulder, our mate mark was blazing like a miniature sun. It wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a living flame, a nexus of power that pulsed with a life of its own. I could feel it, a current running from my skin, through my veins, and directly into Lucian. It was a bridge, a permanent, unbreakable bond being forged in the crucible of this final moment. I felt his soul intertwine with mine, every fear, every joy, every memory becoming a shared tapestry. This was it, the final, irrevocable binding. As the light from our mark pulsed outward, a tremor ran through the city. The world around us, which had been a twisted, nightmarish version of Chicago, began to crumble. Selene's illusion, the grand stage for her hatred, disintegrated like sand castles against a rising tide. The distorted buildings straightened, the blood-red sky softened back into a deep, star-dusted velvet. The people, who had been frozen like statues in a macabre display of her power, began to stir. A car horn blared in the distance. A woman gasped, looking around in confusion. The city was waking up, shaking off the chains of a dream it would never remember. Selene's power, her very presence, had been erased by the raw, unyielding truth of our bond. Lucian's hands, no longer bound by shadow, came up to cup my face. His eyes, now clear and full of a love so profound it stole my breath, searched mine. The last vestiges of the untamed beast were gone, replaced by a reverence that made my heart ache with joy. He leaned in, but it wasn't a hungry or possessive kiss. It was a soft, gentle press of his lips against my forehead, a promise, an anointment, a quiet acknowledgement of everything we had overcome. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his voice a low, rumbling whisper that vibrated through my entire being. "You tamed the beast, Alara Monroe." A small, wondrous smile touched his lips, and became my equal. In that moment, everything clicked into place. I hadn't just saved him, I had risen to meet him. We weren't a monster and his anchor. We were two halves of a whole, balanced and complete. The city hummed around us, alive and oblivious, a sleeping giant beneath our feet. As if on cue, the full moon broke through the last of the clouds, bathing the skyline in a magnificent, ethereal glow. The light washed over us, a celestial spotlight for our final act. And then, from deep within me, a sound I had never made before began to rise. It was a call, ancient and wild. My wolf, finally and truly whole, lifted its voice. A heartbeat later, Lucian's joined mine. Two howls, one a deep baritone of a born alpha, the other a clear, strong soprano of a Luna who had found her power, rose into the night. They twined together, a perfect harmony that soared over the sleeping heart of Chicago, a song of victory, of love, of a destiny not just accepted, but seized. Our beginning, declared to the moon and the stars. If you felt every heartbeat of this story, don't just scroll away. Subscribe, join the pack. And if you won't, drop a comment with your country and tell me why. Let's see who's brave enough to admit they resisted fate. In a dark, forgotten alley slick with rainwater, a lone figure stood shrouded in shadow, the hood of their cloak pulled low. Their gaze was fixed on the moon, a silent observer to the harmony that had just echoed across the city. A flicker of a match illuminated a sharp, familiar jawline for just a second before it was extinguished. A low, chilling voice, laced with an ancient bitterness, whispered into the darkness. "The Draven line isn't finished yet.